Welcome to Battle Rankings.
Welcome to Battle Rankings Podcast. I'm Svetlana, and today I'm joined by John. Last video we did, John, you talked a little bit about everything we need to know about Team Yankee, Flames of War, kind of, before we played. So we got a lot of good responses from your video, kind of talking about how to play the game, and a lot of good responses about just building a list. I thought it'd be really cool to see what a master thought of my list and how I can improve it. And today is a little bit of a surprise for me. Because I gave John this idea to develop into his own episode. So John is going to be talking, mostly John's going to be talking about his thought process on going through building a list. What influences choices, whether it's tournament rules, or if it's just cool. So, John, talk me through it.
So, well, I am an unusual Masters player, whereas most of them attack or maneuver in tournament setting all day long. That's all they like to do. And if they could, they would only attack, whereas I am the opposite, and I defend all that I can. And I build lists that are good at defending. So that is my thought process behind it. So I like to use the Romanians because of one thing. We pull up their infantry. So one stable thing you always need when defending is infantry, because infantry hold and take objectives. So why are Romanian infantry so good? Because of this thing, defend the homeland. They get a better assault, and you can possibly roll to make them veterans. They do have a bad last stand, but if you're last standing, you probably already lost the platoon to begin with in the first place. So the last stand doesn't really matter. It's that assault and how cheap they are and how big the platoons you can take. So that's what I look for, that are the cheap infantry with good stats. And what is the biggest threat to infantry in the defense?
Artillery.
And,
got one right.
And the best way I found to deal with artillery is most players don't bring infantry artillery. They bring armored artillery. And the Romanians have a really good thing to deal with that, because if you take the Stuka plane, pull that up, you buy that for 8 points. And then they have this command card that downgrades it to an even better plane, which doesn't make sense that the better plane costs cheaper, but it does. And you take this little thing, because most artillery in the game don't have a lot of armor. So that anti-tank 7, they usually don't get a save against, and you get 3 shots per plane. So that's 6 shots that you don't need to range in, like the Stuka dive bomber, that they can't save against, and you got a pretty good chance of blowing them up. 5+ still sucks, but you only need to kill 1. Most platoons come in 3, and if you kill just 1, that lessens the effect of the artillery by almost 50%, because they have to re-roll successful hits, especially since you're hit on 4s. So that makes a 50% chance of a hit to a 25% chance of hit.
And that's what makes this one better?
Yes, because you're guaranteed to bail or kill almost all the artillery. And if they're confident trying to remount, that means only half of them are getting back in. So if you kill 1, bail 2, then only 1's getting back in, and then next thing you know, they're last standing, and you might completely get rid of their artillery. So for 6 points, it is a must-take in my opinion for the Romanians, because a 6-point plane is an excellent point cost. So the next thing you want to look at while building a list in defensive is you need a scout. You always have to, usually you deploy first, so you don't want your opponent to be able to spearhead. You want to limit that as much as possible, so you always have to take a scout. So
recon wins.
Yeah, recon wins games. It does. So I always take this 3-point unit because it's only 3 points. It's a little extra armor. It's mobile machine guns against any infantry. Outside of that, they're only there for the spearhead to block your opponents from spearhead.
So what point list are you kind of building this out to?
Let's just do 100 because that's the basis, and you can take or give from there on what you want. So
like the base for tournaments.
Yes,
different.
Most tournaments
games.
are around 100 points, give or take 5 or 10. So I usually build my list to 100 and then modify it from there to go on whatever tournament I'm going to. So we'll base this one off 100 points. So next thing you need, besides those two things, are infantry to hold the objectives. Now, while this is a decently priced platoon, I don't like paying 11, 8, or 6 points for that many units. So the first thing I look at are command cards to see, can I make them cheaper while keeping their effectiveness the same? So there are 2 different types you can take based off what you would like. So if you take a rifle company that's in here, that's a different formation. They are a lot cheaper, almost. So if you take the 9, that's 3 points cheaper, but they're green instead of trained and then possibly veteran. They're green, and if you roll a 5 or 6, they can be trained, which isn't that good, and they're aggressive, which means they're hit on 3s. So that alone would not make them worth the points. But what you could do to the rifle company is you can make them guards. Let's see if I can find the card. Let me know if you see it.
Is it the Mountaineers?
No,
no, Guard Division.
Yeah, Guard Division. There we go. So that Guard Division for 1 point per platoon, so the 8-point unit is now 9 points, makes them fearless. They're still green, so their assaults are going to be terrible.
That's harsh.
But they are careful, but they're fearless. So if you just need them to hold an objective and not kill anything in the assault, this is a good one to do it, because they are fearless and you're going to have a good chance of counterattacking. But the problem is if you're also facing off against a fearless opponent that has anything better than a green skill, they'll whittle you down pretty hard. So while this is a nice card to have because it makes everything fearless and hit on 4s, the green skill for me does not do it. But that is one way you can do it if you want fearless guys. What I like to use is the Mountain Rifle Company. Now, you can either take the cards for the base platoon and just downgrade them from there, or you can actually take the Mountain Rifle Division. And the benefit of taking the normal motorized rifle company is you can take the armored rifle platoon that actually has a half tracks. That's normally what I like to do. So we'll go based off what I normally do. So you get your HQ, which is a must because it's a black box platoon. Take 1 platoon of 7, equip it with the Panzerfaust, give it a mortar, Panzerschreck. I take the mortar because it's extra artillery, and that's one thing you severely lack with these guys is artillery. So I usually like to take the mortar because it's 1 point, and it's helps pin. It doesn't really do that much damage, but for 1 point, it does pin down the enemy. So there we got our base formation, and then we make it cheaper by coming here, going back to the command cards. And finding the mountain rifle platoon. So we have 2 platoons, so we take 2 cards. And that saves us 4 points. And all it does isn't change their stats at all. They still have those amazing stats of trained, possibly veteran, and always hit on 3s in the assaults. And all we lose is our rate of fire. We go from a 3-2 to a 2-1, which in some situations hurts a lot, but for most, the point savings worth it. So after we get our base guys that can hold the line, now we need something to reach out and touch the enemy. And the Romanians have this amazing thing called a 75 millimeter M43 anti-tank platoon. Now, what makes these guys so good is they have an extra 4 inches of range based off normal 75s, and they have anti-tank 13, which is a huge thing. And the best part is they're cheap because they're only 11 points. And the difference between these and the normal 75s that they have is a 1 point difference for a 1 better AT. And that better AT usually throws people for a loop because they'll charge you with late Shermans with Fire Armor 7 at long range thinking they're safe. And then you're like, yeah, I'm AT 13. And yeah, good luck with that. Now they're 5-up save, or at long range, a 4-up save. Now it goes to a 5-up save, which makes these very deadly. Their only problem is they do have that bad last stand, which does become a problem because they're only 3 guns. So you do have to worry about that. And I usually try to keep these near the commander, just try to keep them on the table a little bit longer, because these are the first things people try to kill after you pop them out from an ambush. Now you run into a problem where, because of rules, if you get deep reserves, planes count for deep reserves. And I always like to keep my planes on. So we can't really have anything that's vehicleized, because the Romanians do have a penalty of anything that is an armored car, anything armored that has anti-tank or tank has an armored reserve rule. So you're kind of SOL when it comes to using tanks for the Romanians.
So what's that rule? What does that do?
So that means they can't have more than 1 platoon on the table for tanks, because they're all armored reserves no matter what their armor is, if you have deep reserves.
Oh, okay.
But that also counts for the plane, so that's hence why I just keep these anti-tanks in the planes. So now we got 42 points out of the 60 we're allowed for reserves. So then we go to the motorized rifle platoon, because while this formation is nice and cheap, it is very weak because you need to fill it out a little bit more. So one thing we're missing is artillery. So we'll click on this motorized 81 millimeter mortars. So that is a good smoke. I usually like to take the platoon of 3 for 4 points because it's a good bang for your buck. The only problem is they always remained trained, even if you roll better for them. Look at. So that makes them a little bit better. And then another thing I like to do is take a 12 points. Oh yeah, that's what I was doing. So another thing I like to do is take a armored rifle platoon. Now, the best thing about these is that they're mobile, and you can move them to wherever the attack's coming from. So we got, let's see, 11 points left. So you can either losing my what I'm thinking about. So one thing I like to do is take a information gun, because it's only 7 points. So it adds a little bit extra tank, and it's good against those spams. And it's only 7 points. And we still have 7 points left. And for that mobile platoon is this cavalry troop, which magically becomes 7 points to get that 60. And so they're a good mobile unit if you need to move somewhere, but they're also that extra platoon if somebody's taking too many hits, it needs to be reinforced. And they also get the Panzerfaust, and I like to put a mortar in there, or you can take a lucky card. So that gives you some good anti-tank because you got 2 platoons of anti-tank guns. You don't really have anything mobile, which is a weakness. But your main goal is you want those planes in there because the planes are what kill the artillery, which kill your infantry. You want them to you want to force them to try to assault your infantry because your infantry are going to usually win that assault because they assault on 3s. So now you want to look at what's a good reserve. So the good thing about the Romanians is you can take Soviets or you can take Germans as allies. So one thing I found that works very well for them, if I can find it, is if you take Soviets at 100 points, there's a platoon of very heavy tanks that happen to be 40 points. So if you need to assault somebody and take back a position or have a good unit arrive, the IS-85s, if you take 5 of them, work out to be 40 points exactly. And then you got 5 tanks at front armor 10, side armor 8, so really good assaults because they're veterans. They got a good counterattack, so these are going to be your assault somebody off an objective or come back onto and sit on an objective that's almost being overrun. And they got decent anti-tank and decent armor. And 5 of them equal 40 points. So that would be your reserve unit. You only have 1. And it's something that people are going to worry about. And it gives you something mobile and is most likely going to survive a lot of the stuff that comes at it. That is one thing you can take is the IS-85s. Another unit you can take is the, let's see if I can find it. If you need a little bit higher anti-tank, because anti-tank 13 on your anti-tank guns isn't enough, is you can take the SS Tiger 2s.
I mean, are there situations where that might not be enough particularly?
No, not in my opinion, because anti-tank 17 with a front armor of a 15 usually wins out. The problem is this number of shots. Where is it?
What are you looking for?
Tiger SS, Tiger 2 SS. There we go. Tiger 2 SS. So when we pull these up, 2 of them are 31 points, but now they're impervious from the front. Almost nothing can kill them. They do have some bad side armor, but if you do lose 1, you're still last standing on 2s. They're really great at assaults, except for their 4-up assaults, but you're always going to counterattack. And you got 4 machine guns and an anti-tank gun that's going to shoot through basically anything. And as long as you keep them back, you can easily hold an objective alone by just these guys.
Is this one of the new mid-war monsters?
No, this is late war.
This is one of the late war monsters?
Yes. If this came out in mid-war, that'd be kind of scary. But that's only 31 points. They still need 9 more points to throw into reserve. So let's just say you take those. There are a couple things you can take to fill out the reserve slot. So let's look at, let me see if I can find it. So if we look at their assault gun, it's 14 points, so that's not going to work. The Panzer IV, the T4 as they call it, is 12 points, so that's still going to be too expensive. Or the best way to do it is to take an R2 company.
Would it be inappropriate to make a Star Wars joke?
No. So the good thing about these is they're super cheap tanks that are more mobile machine gun fire than they are anything else. Oops. And they're cheap enough that you can bring a couple of them. It's still a weak formation, but it might be what saves your butt. There we go. And then that's your extra 9 points. And now you got 9 extra tanks that can take out light vehicles, or they can machine gun infantry trying to take an objective from your infantry. But now you got 4 platoons in reserve versus the Soviet version where you got 1. But now you got a lot higher anti-tank, and you got more machine guns you can move around with. So that is a way you can look at building that 100-point list.
Okay.
So you get 2 decent-sized infantry platoons with some mortars for extra artillery. You get 1 smoke, which is good / bad on its own. You get 6 anti-tank guns, 1 really good one that's more for taking out like armored cars and like chaffies or light anti-tank. It's more there to stop tanks from going in all nilly-willy, thinking that they have nothing to worry about. I would more ambush your pack guns with the AT-13 and just keep these. You want to ambush the pack 40s versus the pack 36s. And you definitely want those flights to take out any artillery in the back. And then from there, just work on small platoons to try to chip away for points. And yeah, so that is what I usually use as a list.
So how do you manipulate something like this to work with special rules? Kind of like the this side tournament has you have to have at least 1 infantry unit. Now, like that full well works for this one. Because you only have
well, I definitely have more than 1 infantry.
Or because like it was like where there's like limitations on number of formations or types of units you can bring. How do you manipulate a list so that it meets those requirements while still meeting what you like to build?
So if I only had a 1 formation limit, I would take the Soviet platoon as the reserves because it's just 1 platoon and it fits perfectly at 40 points.
So you just make choices based upon.
Yeah, I change that list based off what the point level is. If it's a higher point, then the cavalry troop gets bigger. Or I take the armored rifles instead of the cav troop because that's more machine guns. I just did that because I took the extra anti-tank guns. Because if you look at that, that's 14 points. That almost equals exactly what the armored troop is. But if it's a higher point, I usually get rid of the cav troop and add in the armored rifles because that adds an extra unit in the formation. Or if it's the lower points, I still probably get rid of the cav troop to save points and then spend any extra points left over from getting rid of them on something else.
What about tournaments where the lists either regress in point numbers or increase in point numbers depending on wins and losses? How do you determine the lists based upon those sorts of games?
I just build the list based off the point total. Like you maximize the list based off what the points you have. You don't, unless it says you have to keep certain units in there, which most of it is you have to keep your core formation, which is fine. You just add different support units to maximize what you have for points.
What are some of the rule twists that usually cause the most challenges?
Where you are forced to pick different stances, or if you have to pick each stance once, that hurts this list a lot.
What about in other lists you built? How do you are there any particular tournaments that kind of challenge your list building
Where for
strategies?
those for what I like to play, or like I said again, where you have to do every single stance, because that takes me out of my comfort zone, and I don't get to play the list I like to play. I like to defend against the hordes as they crash into my infantry. I don't like to be the attacker. This because I like to play infantry lists. It's hard to play infantry when you're attacking because if you don't have enough of them, like this list is good for defending, it's not good for attacking. It's not good for maneuvering. It's only good for defending. That's the type of list I like to play. If you want to attack and be the guy rushing out there in the open, this is not the list for you. I'll have to do a different video on building a maneuver list versus an attack list. But this is what you like. If you want to defend and take a whole bunch of punishment and wipe out a lot of the opponent's units, this is a good list for that.
How would I, as a novice, apply some of the various different suggestions that you brought up in terms of like, how do I build my list with intention in terms of like, what units do I bring if I want to do maneuver or versus attack versus how much do I need to take into consideration reserves or
Well, if you're maneuvering, you're almost guaranteed to have reserves too. So you always want to plan on, well, if I have reserves, what am I going to put in reserves? You don't make plans based on everything being on the table at once. You make plans on what do I have off the table and what can I survive without that being on the table. And then the best lists are always the combined arms list. The ones that have infantry, scouts, artillery, and air power. Those are the lists that usually do the best. Now, you can't always take everything based on point costs. So sometimes air power is not that big of a deal not to have. But everything, you definitely need artillery, you definitely need armor, and you definitely need infantry. That's what wins you games. Having one of only thing, because if you only have tanks, everybody knows you're going to be attacking, and you're only going to be picking attack. And so it's very easy for an infantry player to be like, well, I know he's going to attack. He's going to throw down attack. So I'm going to throw down attack. And that's a good chance that he's going to get reserves. And a lot of his stuff that he needs on the table is not going to be on the table. And that helps me a lot more if he has to defend his own territory, let alone try to attack me. So even though if I have a defensive list like that, I'd still throw down an attack if I came against nothing but an armored list because I know that he's only going to pick attack. So it's knowing what your opponent's going to do based off what their list looks like and using an attack or defense or maneuver stance to get them in a bad mission that they don't want to play.
I had a thought, but I lost it. What was the most useful thing in list building for you, learning how to play the game, starting out?
Learning how to do the combined arms with the most efficient way possible. And a lot of it is a lot of cheap units because the more shots you have on the table, the more damage you do. Even if they're not the best shots, enough shots will damage the stuff, everything around what you want to kill. Like they can have the Tiger 2s coming down on you. You have nothing that can kill them. But if you kill everything else around them, then they don't have enough to defend their sides from anything you have that can kill them. And eventually, they're going to have to put them out in the open to a point where they don't want them, and then that's an easy way to kill them. You just kill everything around them. It makes them a lot less useful.
Anything that is there anything that we might have missed in this topic or discussion that's pertinent to it?
No, I covered everything on how to build a good defensive Romanian list.
All right. Cool. Thank you for the surprise. Thank you for coming back to the basement studio.
You should get in touch with the owner. He's redecorate his basement.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, should tell him that.
I'll take that up with the property owner later. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your suggestions and your thoughts. I enjoy when a video comes out to just like go through and be like, oh, cool. Like this is awesome. Somebody said something to me, and it helps us develop our content, develop ideas, and get better. So like, share, comment, subscribe, hit all the fun buttons, tell your friends, and see you next Wednesday.
Welcome to Battle Ranking.